This time of year has always had special meaning for me for a variety of reasons. I spent most of my career in teaching, and January was always the time when you could look back at whatever you did the previous semester, diagnose what had gone well and what had gone badly, and look ahead to the remaining half of the school year with the idea that mistakes could be corrected and successes capitalized upon. And of course, it's the season for resolutions, which is the same impulse on a larger scale. Taking stock, changing course, doing better. In some ways, the transition from December to January is an arbitrary milestone, like your odometer rolling over. But it's still useful for reminding yourself to stop and see how you're doing. This is also the season for commemorations and observances. In addition to New Year's Day, Kwanzaa also ends on the 1st. And there's the Feast of the Epiphany, or 12th night, a little later. And of course, Martin Luther King Day tomorrow. On a personal note, my mom's birthday is coming up this week. She was born in 1923, more than a century ago. That seemed like a vast amount of time. But from another perspective, from her to me is a single generation. So perhaps it's not so great a distance after all. And when it comes to New Year's resolutions, my mother was one of the great self-improvers. There was also always a project for personal betterment, and usually multiple projects going on in her life. Things to learn, habits to break, people to cultivate. And being a mom, that impulse naturally spilled over to my brother and me. On New Year's Day, we were always expected to come up with some resolutions for the coming year. We would announce them around the dinner table, and believe me, we would be reminded of them from time to time. There's a song in our hymnal with words taken from a poem by Don Marquis. It opens this way. A fierce unrest seethes at the core of all existing things. It was the eager wish to soar that gave the gods their wings. From deed to dream, from dream to deed, from daring hope to hope, the restless wish, the instant need, still drove us up the slope. I quote that poem because it speaks to me about what lies behind our desire to make resolutions and improve ourselves. It's dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction is a powerful motivator. I resolve to change because I'm dissatisfied with something about myself. I need to be kinder, more patient, more fit, more productive. Or I'm dissatisfied with the world as I see it. And I step into the social arena to take action. Last Sunday, Natalie talked about courage and social action. I was thinking about her talk this week, and it occurred to me that in the story of her grandfather, there was a critical element that is often absent from other stories. The situation he was in forced him to choose between courage and cowardice. Most of us in our quiet, middle-class lives don't face that kind of choice. Our decisions to work toward change have to come from inside ourselves, from a combination of dissatisfaction with the way things are and the commitment to stick to our choice. And there's the rub. Commitment. There's one other arena in which the word resolution is used a lot: politics and government. The city council passes a resolution in honor of someone. A legislator introduces a resolution to support or oppose some cause. And instinctively, we know what these resolutions are worth. That's the way that resolution becomes synonymous with empty promise. So the coming of the new year, the making of resolutions, brings with it a whole set of complexities and challenges. I think we all recognize that the desire for self-improvement and for social change is fundamentally a good thing. But I also think it's important to acknowledge that the emotions that drive this desire, dissatisfaction and unhappiness with the status quo, are at heart negative emotions. Like all negative emotions, they need to be watched carefully to keep them from overtaking everything else. We all know people who get caught in the cycle of self-criticism. We're all subject to it. I experience it myself sometimes, that nagging sense that whatever I'm doing, it's just not good enough. I could do better. A certain amount of self-criticism is useful, but too much leads to paralysis and dysfunction. The challenge is to find the right level of dissatisfaction without overdoing it. I've been reading some books on medieval history lately, and one thing that stands out to me is how comparatively recent, historically speaking, the whole idea of self-improvement is. For most of human history, your station in life was whatever you were born into. Your job was to accommodate yourself to the will of God and fulfill that assigned role as best you could. As for changing the social order, well, that would get you beheaded. If you watched the recent TV series on the American Revolution, you probably picked up on the idea that what made the revolution so radical was not that it replaced one ruler with another. That kind of regime change has happened many times in history. The radical part was the idea of self-determination, the idea that people not only had a right, but an obligation to choose their path in life. This ideology, as we know, started out imperfectly, with that right extended only to free white men. And its imperfection continues to this day. But it's definitely baked into our national self-image. And I think that's why Americans in particular are so fascinated by stories of self-reinvention. Sharon and I have recently been rewatching the old HBO series Mad Men. In Mad Men, the main character, Don Draper, through a wartime coincidence, is able to shed his old identity as an impoverished farm boy and return to the U.S. as a war hero, a lieutenant, whose instinct for what people want to hear makes him the ideal creative director at a Madison Avenue advertising agency. In other words, Don is the archetypal American self-reinventor. One early episode begins with an actual incident from 1962, a terrible plane crash from the New York airport in which all passengers and crew were killed shortly after takeoff. After their initial shock, the admin in Don's company smell opportunity. Surely the airline will be looking for a new agency to help them rebuild their image after the disaster. So they worked for days on a pitch to the airline, with campaigns focused on reliability and safety, until dawn hits upon the solution for how to deal with the accident. Pretend it never happened. America doesn't have a past, he announces to the assembled team. America only has a future. So on they go. But as Don comes to learn, America does have a past. And that past doesn't go away by pretending it doesn't exist. And the same is true for each of us. As we look to the new year and the new things we want to accomplish, the new improved person we want to become, we do well not to forget the old person and stay in touch. That person knows a lot. I've been speaking about personal reinvention, but I think the same applies to social change. As much as we might like to be able to wave a wand and see positive change happen through an election or a law or a new leader, the actual work of change is slow and, frankly, rather tedious. I don't usually single out people from the pulpit, but I have to say that when I remember the long, painstaking work that Carol Nichols put into the revamping and rebuilding of our public school infrastructure, or when I see the kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back labor that Lisa Wagoda pursues on safe and affordable housing, that's where I really see social reinvention happening. And they would probably tell you that their accomplishments build on the work of others who came before them, who tried and possibly failed, or at least only partially succeeded. A friend of mine told me recently that he was not making any New Year's resolutions. Instead, he said he was setting an intention to do certain things. I'd never heard this expression before, but it turns out that it's common in psychotherapy. Setting an intention differs from making a resolution, in that resolutions tend to be specific goals that can be achieved or failed. Intentions, as one author put it, are mindful practices that serve as guideposts for action. You don't succeed or fail with intentions. You just practice them. For example, I might set an intention to really listen when people talk to me, not just wait for my turn to speak. So when I enter a social situation, I'd remind myself of my intention, take a breath, and try to implement. I like this approach to thinking about the new year and ways to improve myself and my world. It avoids unrealistically high expectations and the disappointment that always comes with failing to meet those expectations. It doesn't require me to become a new person, just a more intentional one. It keeps me focused on the present, and it gets me out of the dissatisfaction trap. So as we look ahead, let's all set some intentions for ourselves without placing ourselves into too much of a burden or a bind. We'll be better for it, and maybe the world will too. And as we enter our time of meditation, I want to pose the following question to you. What is your intention for yourself for the coming week, month, or year? What is your intention for your community?